Hey everyone, it's Joe here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here in Copenhagen, Denmark.
And we were last webinar, and I don't remember the exact wording, but we were helping someone with a script, and I mentioned, sometimes you can send control clicks, and stated, incorrectly. I'll agree because Jackie corrected me. I said, oh, they're superior. I'm like, well, Jackie's like, yeah, they're not quite superior, but they're different, but they have their pros and cons. And so I thought, hey, you know what? We didn't get into it a lot at that webinar, but let's discuss some of the pros and cons of sending control clicks and control set text and get text versus mouse clicks and interacting, sending, control C and this and that. The first one for me is there's a couple for the control stuff is and correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie, the window not only doesn't have to be active, it can even be hidden, right? Which is a really nice benefit. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say it depends on how you define hidden,
Okay.
because hidden can be different types of things. Minimized,
Yeah.
most likely not.
Oh, okay.
But behind other things, sure.
Yep.
So in that aspect, it doesn't need to be visible. It can be behind other windows that you're working on, or it could be on a separate virtual desktop.
Right.
Stuff like that. It can be in other places than where you're working, but it does depend on different things. And I know for one thing that because Windows is trying to optimize resources, minimizing a window actually does make the window act a little differently. And it might not have an area for you to click in. So
Yep.
It should have the controls, and that's why I'm saying it. It really depends. Yeah.
The next one would be, to me, it's a huge one, is it doesn't have to take away the focus. If you're using your computer, it can be running in the background, and it does everything in the background, and it never, you don't interrupt that process. And that to me is a biggie. If and when you're using the computer. If you're not, it's not a big sell, but that's a nice one.
That is really a nice one, right? It's one of the reasons that so many, at least AutoHotkey users, are shoved that way when wanting to do something while they're using their computer, just because in a lot of cases you can actually have something going on while you're doing other stuff. And depends on whatever it is. Some people have used it for don't even have ready examples per se, but if I'm sitting there at work currently working on something and it can do something else while I'm still being productive, that just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And lastly, and this is where, well, not lastly, there's another one, is the speed and reliability for me. And part of it's because of what we just mentioned, right? The reliability is if I'm using the computer and I'm doing something else and I'm actively moving the mouse, and yet the mouse move does a quick jaunt, I can mess up that script, or it could mess me up with what I was actually trying to do. Doing it with controls negates that, and part of that really builds with reliability and consistency that's going to run the way you want it to run.
Yeah, and that's also where what we got in on back in the webinar. It is really the reliability of control, click, control, send, and stuff like that. Is that if you have a Windows control to act upon, then it's hard to talk about reliability. It will send the message of that control being clicked, and can't really be misinterpreted if it's done correctly. So yeah, it has ultimate reliability, might be a way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. And speed to compare to sending if you're setting a text value versus sending keystrokes, sending words. Again, it's just so fast.
Yeah, true. It's
Having said that, I'll admit, let's talk about some of the negatives. Is I've had it where even though I can identify that control programmatically, it doesn't necessarily accept the commands I'm sending to it. It doesn't reliably, consistently use it every time. It's not that often, but it has come up.
yeah, and that was what I was trying to allude to, at least with, let's say you have an edit field.
Yeah.
And that edit field has been correctly identified. And there's no issue with it being some kind of dynamic thing that you're missing or anything like that. If you have correctly identified the edit field and you're using send text, let's call it, isn't that control send text or set text or something like
set
that?
Set text, yeah, control set text.
Then you're using Windows's built-in method of telling a control to have a specific content. So it's not like you're saying, oh, here's the T key and here's the H key. No, you're just programmatically telling the Windows control with all of what's built into Windows that you should have this value. End of discussion. And of course, when you begin talking about that being maybe unreliable at times or not working, if it worked one time and then stopped working without you changing anything, then perhaps Windows or the message queue or the process, whatever it might be, had some kind of hiccup. It was busy, it was overburdened, it was whatever it could have been. At least if it has worked once and there has been no change. Whereas if you had a script that worked, close the program, close the script, close your computer, whatever you did, and then it stopped working, then it's most likely a matter of not having consistently identified the control. That would be my guess.
Yeah, and that's one of the drawbacks is newer programs either A, don't even use the controls, the type of stuff that we can touch with those commands. Now there's other ways you can do it with AutoHotkey, but the control, get, control, set text, those things. Some of the newer ones like the Windows ribbon, right? The vast majority of the buttons in there aren't those kind of controls that you can use with that command. Oh, the other one is, I read this because I was reading up on controls here, so I'm a little more knowledgeable than I was last week. In that newer programs also are dynamically creating those controls, which is what you just mentioned. That's what I wanted to say is like that's, and I didn't realize at the time before, but that's probably what I was running into was it wasn't. I didn't think it was a matter of. I have also had like you can't hammer a control and set it too fast on some programs if they're just older and they can accept at a certain rate, which again, it's not the actual controls problem, right? That's the limitation of the program. But but it's, I think that control number or something was changing and it just you couldn't do that. And before we switch to the other one, but I wanted to mention there is because you said the control set text, but then there is a control send, and that's where you're sending the keystrokes. Or yeah, I think it actually does say keystrokes, and there's control send raw to send the raw text, and that literally is sending. And then so that to me is kind of a blend of the two. You're using the control, but you're sending keystrokes, which is interesting in itself to me.
Yeah, I'd say I don't remember the AutoHotkey source, even though I probably have read it at one point, but these control send, control set text, control click and stuff like that are what's called wrappers. You've heard that term before. For Windows is, yeah, I'm trying it to say it with a W, wrappers, and not with an R, but yeah.
That's awesome. Right.
Are wrappers for Windows's send and post a message.
Yeah.
And when you post, if you look into that, if that's something that one does, you would see that sending An E keystroke would have a specific message that you would send, like, okay, that was the E key that was down and the E key that was up. It's the simple workings of how Windows does its thing with the shell in between. Then you click the hardware and the hardware tells the computer send the input, and then Windows interprets that into messages and sends the input message to whatever queue is on the system. And the program gets the message and it processes it, might tell Windows back that it processed it. But that's what the command control commands are doing. They're sending these messages. And if you look at those, you can see that there's a down and up message and something in between on everything that you do.
Oh,
you
man.
can download a program that will show you the entire queue of what's going on. It's a lot of stuff going on. So when you move your mouse across a window, each small move of this will send an endless stream of messages to the window telling it that a mouse has now moved from here to here to here to here to here in a small dots, right? And the same thing, as soon as you click the button, it will send a message of the button being down and the button being up, and the time in between those two actions will then be interpreted by the program to do something. And that's the exact same thing with these commands that we're using. So when you send an amount of keystrokes, let's say you send hello world to something, that would be an amount of send or posted messages to that window. So if that's failing, something else is awry, right? It's the input queue or something else, or the program, as you said yourself, has a limited speed that it can process input. And if you have made a program that's supposed to be usable by a human,
Right.
then that speed would maybe not need to be that high.
Right.
Something that we've talked about many times before, Joe. It's like a lot of new users come into AutoHotkey and says, I want to send a T, and as immediately after, I want to send an E. Okay, that's fine. So send a T and an E. And then there would either be, it didn't get the E, or there would be, there's too much time between the T and the E. I want it to be instantaneous. And you can get close to that. But the issue is that depending on whatever it is that you're automating, sometimes you want it to be more human speed, and sometimes you do not. And human speed are not 5 milliseconds between, right? It's just not humanly possible to get to something like that. So yeah, you can both overburden a program by sending it messages faster than it was built to interpret them. And I know from helping people with game scripts that different types of hardware also needs a key to be down for a specific period of time. So let's say when you're pressing an H with your finger, the amount of time it's actually down is just for you to make the move and take it up. Even if you're doing it fast, the key might be down for 21 milliseconds. Just something I'm guessing. So if you just tell AutoHotkey to send H, and doesn't matter, just do it quickly, then that program, game, whatever, might not have time to act on it because it has an input loop that maybe takes 20 milliseconds to resolve, right? So the key actually needs to be down.
Case in point, I was playing with control set text and control send today, and the control set text worked just like I had expected to. When I was using the control send, where I'm sending the literal keystrokes, I was sending it to the notepad's like search and replace box in the edit field, and it was interesting. Like I wrote, let's say, wow, and using the set text, as you mentioned, you did a really good job explaining. Like it just said it right. It was just done instantly there. The send, when I first did it, it worked fine, and then I did it again, and then it sent everything capitalized, even though my text wasn't capitalized. And then I'd like miss a letter, and so I instead thought, you know what, I'm gonna change the set key delay. I'm gonna slow it down some, and sure enough, when I dropped it some, everything worked perfect. But it was a great real world, like, oh yeah, you know what, it couldn't handle that sending of the keystrokes that quickly. And also I was practicing with the excellent, sending special characters. And so it was a fun example of like, oh yeah, I was glad I stumbled upon it as a real world example of like, this is how things break, right? You'd think you're fine, but look, you know what? Faster isn't always better if the thing can't handle it.
No, and I know that AutoHotkey, because it's been developed for that many years, and small quirks have come up both in the OS and people wanting to do things a specific way, or they're expecting things to work in a specific way. And some of those Windows quirks or workarounds and whatnot has been built into AutoHotkey. So I don't remember something specific, but I do know that modifier keys like Control and the Windows key and Alt and stuff are used in different ways to, let's say, when you use a hotkey that includes whatever, the Windows key or something, a hotkey might also send a Control key down to stop Windows from opening the Windows menu.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, you want to use that key and you want to use another key, and that's totally fine, but you don't want the Windows menu to show up each time. So to get around that, because Windows or AutoHotkey, the interpreter, sees that, oh, you have that modifier key, you don't want that to happen, we'll do this small thing over here. And it shouldn't be something that you would notice very often, but when you get to these edge cases,
yeah,
where you're sending a lot of stuff or unique characters or something somewhere, and the system or whatever it is, or the program might not be quick enough to release that modifier key. Like you said, it's doing everything in capitalized, or it's missing a letter or whatever. And it's most likely because of the input queue not having time to process all of those different things that it needs to do it correctly.
Cool. The last one I just wanted to bring up that comes to my mind is I was playing with the control getPosition of a control. So, a control, I actually read a really good, and Maestreeth actually said it at first, because I was like, what, I'm sorry, what is a control? Like, help me understand this. Is basically, look, the simplest way, it's a window inside a window was the easiest way to describe it. I'm like, you know what? Oh, okay. And then from reading the Microsoft documentation, a couple other ones, it was like, well, and usually that window is something that is going to take some sort of action, like a mouse click or a edit field or whatever. But it's those are the ones. That's the beauty, the strength of it, right? Is because those are the things that we're gonna want to automate stuff that humans are doing, right? If it wasn't something that humans are going to affect, then being able to connect with it isn't really that important, probably more often than not. So anyway, I was reading this, and it got me thinking of the whole, like the tool, the automate my task tool I wrote, or Maestreeth wrote, I designed and stuff, is based off of finding images and looking for them and clicking them, which you and I both know I don't in any way endorse this as like a, hey, that's your first approach, right? Unless it's a really fast and dirty, get it done thing. Because that image on different computers and different things and different resolutions, it just breaks. It does. But that's why I was like, hey, this whole find get position, even if I wanted to, the fact that I can get that position and I can identify it, if I wanted to then send a click there, or send my text there, the fact that I can identify that unique window based off of the hierarchy of the name of the program, the class of the whatever window it's in, and then the actual later instance of the control. That's amazing. And that's where you're like, hey, if you take that route as much as the other one's fast and easy, you know what? That's a great way to get something done reliably.
Yeah, and to a lot of aspects, and some of it might be because we're old school or whatever you'd call that, but with the newer stuff that's going on in Windows, with all the different things that's been going on through the last couple of years, with going from the classic controls that we're mostly talking about now over into these Windows forms. I don't remember where it's a little bit more dynamically built, and the naming of it is, as we talked about, a number can change and stuff like that. Over into the ribbon, which I don't remember how that was made, but now it's these Windows native apps or whatever it's called, which are made in, again, a different way from my understanding. And each iteration of this has removed the things that we at least know or have come to like or whatever. And other stuff has, of course, been implemented over time. I know from the easy accessibility thing, I can't remember the name now.
Access, yeah. Anyway, I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. And you can use that more, and getting in tune with that would probably be a good way to try and interact. And I know you made a video with someone you interviewed at some point that was using a tool for automating that specific part of a Windows program.
Right.
And so that's one aspect of it. And then there's the graphics that we're humans are using, which is what makes automate my task or find text or image search or whatever. The tool that's closest to what we are doing.
Yeah.
We're viewing the screen
and
interpreting it into different things, and then we're physically moving the mouse and by that moving the cursor. Whereas how programming and what we are calling reliability and all that stuff has been a matter of knowing more about what's going on behind the scenes. Because how many day-to-day Windows users have a deeper understanding that a window is built up of controls? They just see a graphical interface.
Sure.
They have no real insight into a button being something different than the other button. It could just as easily be a child drawing that they are clicking at a coordinate. It's that aspect of it being a control or a window in a window, or that messages are being sent back and forth. All of that stuff is an extra part of what you, as super user or whatever you'd call that, actually have learned.
Do you happen to know, because I'm really glad you just mentioned that, it reminded me, as you mentioned in controls, with AutoHotkey's commands, we're really wrapping the send message and maybe post message to Windows to do those things on those windows, right? On the controls. My question is, with the new, the ribbon, is there any possibility, because I've played with a couple tools to interact with that ribbon. It looks like we can probably do some stuff with it, but my question is, are those actually, is that a cover, like a wrapper also, that's ended up sending messages, in using the send message in some way that we could actually look into send message? Because I haven't tried that approach of looking at send message and seeing if there's equivalence, in that.
I'd say that in essence, it should be what's going on, right? It wouldn't really make much sense to me if that had changed in any way.
Yeah, it's such a lower level thing, right? That it's
yeah, they might have done changes to it. I wouldn't be able to say. I just started sharing something here, and let's see if I have the this one. Yeah, this is an app for showing windows and messages and all that types of stuff. And I don't even know if I have something that's like a native app or what. Maybe Edge, I don't know.
calculator, the newer calculator.
Oh yeah, the newer calculator might be a good one to go for. So this one here, right? If we look at the Windows SPY and we look here, it's not really changing anything. Nothing over here is changing. It's just seeing the application frame window and whatever the host is.
Yeah,
and
especially that class NN, right? That's the major one that we would really want to be updated.
Whereas here, if we look here, we can see that it's updating at least the mouse and the mouse coordinates. And over here, that's what we're seeing as well. But none of them are actually updating any of the control information. Windows UI core window 1. Okay, and in Edge, we don't even have that. We don't have any kind of focused control being in any way exposed to us. Just it's blank, right? So when looking at that, these messages up here, if we go to the app that I just opened, search, should we go with the calculator? That's perhaps the most straightforward one. I'll take that one. Yeah. What? For some reason, it couldn't find the window with my search criteria. Okay. It's actually finding something. Can you see that? It's seeing the mouse is doing something, but it should be able to find it. Do I need to update this? There's an update there. Okay. Because I opened the calculator after I opened this one. So here you have it. Here you have the window. That's a calculator.
Can you have move your Microsoft SPY around? I'm just curious if it's in any way affecting the visual of if the calculator is getting updated at all when you're clicking it. Some tools will show you where you're highlighted. No, the other way around. Yeah, click there. One. Yeah. No, okay, it's not. Doesn't seem to be.
Don't remember if it has any type of show. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. No.
Hey, messages. That's interesting. I mean, it's good. Maybe we can see the messages that are.
Yeah, these are just the messages that I want to see currently. Okay. So
we can filter on later if we choose to. Yeah.
Yeah. See here, I can highlight by right-clicking and saying highlight, but currently there's nothing really to highlight on the calculator window because they're not really visible. I've managed to highlight stuff before, but maybe if we, as an attempt, just took this one over here, said okay, and it's not really highlighting it. How about this one? Oh yeah.
There it goes.
So that's how the highlight would look if there's actually something to highlight. So when doing the same thing for the calculator window over here, there is only 4 exposed Windows or for controls or whatever you would call that, the application frame title bar. That's probably this one up here. That's my guess.
And what technology or backbone is this Microsoft Spy showing us? Do you know what I mean by that? Is it the ACP? Is it the new version of it, which I can't recall what that's called?
No, this one is showing us the controls or the windows. There should be no hidden windows here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So it's showing us the control structure, what we're used to being able to click. So you could search for this one and click on it or send text to it.
Right.
And that's why I hoped I would be able to highlight it, but I ain't.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else to show? I was going to say, because I have one here I'd like to show on a similar...
Yeah, sure. I wanted to go with this one, which is the control I get when I'm over here. I get the Windows UI core window 1, which is this one.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pop up the messages and start. I might need to. Did I stop it or did I start it? That looks like a stop one. I did turn those on. So if I instead go for this one over here. I'd actually thought that I would see the messages over here. Maybe I've actually turned that off. Should have zoned the messages, but it didn't.
Yeah, I've used a different tool where it goes crazy showing you all the messages, right, that are going on. But obviously with the calculator, yeah, we may not be able to see that.
That was the exact same thing. It should still be able to show you the messages. I just don't know why it actually didn't show me the messages, and it's most likely because I've turned something off at some point. Oh yeah, there they are. So those are the messages that are going on here in the Windows Spy. You can see when I mouse over it, it shows even more and tells the mouse move. As you can see, the mouse move is one of the ones that are here the most when I actually move the mouse over stuff. And here it's just saying, oh, that's being updated. So
and then
setting a control color static.
Yeah.
It's just because there's a loop built into the Windows Spy that makes it keep updating on that brush.
Right.
But if we instead went over to this one, I'm not sure if I didn't actually manage to shift the window that it chose to.
Maybe the messages are tied. There you go.
I would have expected the messages to show up here, right?
Yeah.
As soon as I did stuff over here, but it's not. And
yeah,
why it's not, I'm not really sure.
Right.
Maybe because the messages are not going to the window that I've chosen to show. Yeah, to me, it's kind of weird because I would actually have thought that it would have
Mhm.
shown it, but
Well,
apparently it's
so
not.
we got at least a minimum of two things I can think of, right? A, that Microsoft Spy plus plus tool, for whatever reason, can't work the same way on programs that are written differently and just show messages, right? Option B is the calculator actually isn't even sending messages, right? We don't know which one of those are even true, or there's other options of maybe, something else is going on.
Yeah, to me, it would be weird. I wouldn't be able to say 100% that it isn't sending messages, but don't see how Windows would work without sending messages.
Well, they just might have a different infrastructure, is the way I'm thinking of it, right? I mean,
Yeah, this isn't the newest tool.
right. Well, that was what I wanted to show was it's not given the level you were doing, but let me go ahead and share unless you
Yeah,
got something else you want to highlight.
no, it's fine.
Okay. Share my screen, bring over a calculator. So here's calculator. Now, let me move it up a little bit. There's this tool that it took me a while to find. I'll at some point put the link out to where you can get it. But it can peek inside. And when I start clicking things, you'll see, right? It gets down to each button, and you can see very minutia, just like the controls in what we're used to. So this is what I had some training on from some guy that you could get like default behaviors and get a value, but they were not nearly as flexible in what I was doing with controls. And I don't know if this tool shows anything. I was just clicking around here a minute ago to see if it had any sort of elements or something, but I don't see anything that tells it to show you, the tracking of what's actually being triggered. I can send somewhere I saw I can. Where was that? It's not, obviously not there. Here's button. Because I remember there was a way to tell it to do stuff, and I could also update something there. But I don't recall how to do. Oh, maybe it's over here. And we don't have to go in this now, but this is that UIA technology, right?
Yeah.
So this is one of the new technologies that are out there that hopefully someone can in AutoHotkey, build a library around how to access this technology. So we continue to use AutoHotkey in newer versions of programs, right? This, as you mentioned, there's other ones too, right? So it's not just this isn't the only one, but it's one that apparently some tools are using.
Yeah, sure. And that is what I was getting to, that the Spy++ wasn't showing the old type of controls. There were only 4 visible. Whereas, as one can see here quite easily, the window calculator actually has quite a few amounts of different things in it, as you have already unfolded the calculator tree.
Control-Shift-F. I have the feeling it's supposed to be actually tracking my mouse, and I don't know.
But that was what you had with Control-Shift-H. You just disabled that, right?
Focus
Control-Shift-F. So when you go to the window, it would show what you had focused, right? So if you clicked on one of them, it would become focused.
Okay. Now here's
and the other one you had was the hover.
Okay. Here's button 5. I was trying to see if there's I expected to see the number 5 somewhere in here. Is it?
I can't actually see the entire thing because of.
We don't need to see that at the moment. I can move this over here even. There, is that better?
So does it have anything further down?
That's it right there.
It has the name 5, but it doesn't have the number 5.
Yeah. I'm really surprised this stuff on the right isn't updating based on what I click here. I thought it would.
No, I think that's the overall properties of the
okay.
number 5 button. You have some invoke pattern and you have some scroll item pattern that's not unfolded there on the right. Maybe those can have some info. No, it's just one has the invoke method, apparently. Probably able to click it and we'll do stuff.
I think that just...
And then you invoked it.
Yeah.
That was what
and that was, if I remember correctly, that was the thing is like, I can do the default action and I'm just going to interpret this as that's the default action I can send is basically click it, right? But do whatever the default thing is.
Yeah.
So again, it can be programmatically automated with AutoHotkey, but not with our general control commands.
No.
But anyway, we're getting a little off track, but it's still all related to controls. Don't get me wrong. Just lots of good stuff.
Yeah, the interesting part is more like, why is it showing a 5?
Yeah, right.
That's...
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere, right?
That's the only thing that to me is kind of still hidden away. Why is there a number 5 on it? Right. Because there's no information that we have found yet.
Right.
That is telling us that a 5 needs to be there. Unless the only place there has, that's the place, right, that has the number 5. So unless something is actually interpreting on that automation ID, which would seem weird.
Right. Agreed.
Snap mouse to clickable point. So then it will jump there. Yeah. Okay. So that worked.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The interesting thing with this and AutoHotkey would be to get a good UIA automation library or something going, and there is a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just not that.
Right. Yeah. We need someone really advanced to start working with it. I did actually pay Maestrieth a little to play with this. We got to where we could see, hey, you can send the default actions, this and that, but we didn't build a tool that'll make it easy for us to start using, right? That's the next step.
The thing.
And maybe someday I'll pay him to do that, because that's a time-consuming process.
Yeah. No. But I'd say I'd give you it that this was, of course, the extra level and a new way of showing, hey, stuff is going on with controls and the stuff that we're saying now about control send and control click, and might not be the end all whatever in a few years, because more and more stuff are built in this way.
Seems like the tool has crashed.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Cool. All right, man. Well, this was a good talk.
Yeah, it was.
Right. See you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
If I could hit stop. There we go.